As Stuart mentioned, we have three speakers today. We're going to cover a number of a fairly wide range of climate and energy topics. Our first two speakers will summarize the steps their organizations are taking to cut carbon emissions from their operations and services. Our third speaker will identify additional policies and programs for reducing carbon emissions that could be implemented in the community. And we've allotted 30 minutes for each speaker or presenter, and this will include a 10-minute Q&A session after each presentation. And if you want to put your questions in the chat box, that's fine, or just raise your hand and we'll get to you. Our first presenter is Joe Salkowski. Joe oversees communications, government affairs, and community relations for Tucson Electric Power, our local electricity provider in the community. He's managed strategic messaging, public relations, and outreach for key public policy issues, including rate proposals, clean energy rules, electric market restructuring, and other energy-related legislation and ballot measures. Joe serves on the Tucson Metro Chamber Board of Directors and the Leadership Council of United Way of Tucson and the Southern Arizona's Cradle to Grave Partnership. So he's very involved in the community activities. Before joining TEP, Joe worked as a reporter for the Arizona Daily Star and as a nationally syndicated columnist for Tribune Media Services. Joe will be describing some of the policies and programs that TEP has adopted to reduce the carbon footprint from its operations. I'll turn it over to Joe. Do we need to give Joe screen sharing?
I think you do. The host has, if the host would need to enable it.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to share when I can. And thank you all for coming and inviting me here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, the good work we're doing at TEP. And, you know, I find most of the time for these events, people have a lot of questions. Sometimes I don't even talk, I just answer questions. As an old reporter, I kind of enjoy that turnabout as fair play. So I'll try and go through these pretty quickly if I can. Make sure we got time for questions, and I was going to set myself a little clock here to make sure I don't go too long. Just a little bit about our company. Many of you recognize the logo there on the lower left, but we are part of a larger company that includes sister utility Unisource Energy Services that provides gas and electric service in rural parts of Arizona, northern Arizona, as well as Santa Cruz County. Those are systems that our company purchased back in 2003. And our parent company, UNS Energy, is owned by Fortis, which is the largest publicly traded utility holding company in Canada. It's based in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is a pretty cool place to visit if you ever get the chance. 4.5 hour time difference, which is strange, that half hour. Don't exactly know why that happened, but one thing that makes us feel a little bit more at home when we're there is that the company is led by Dave Hutchins, TEP's former chief executive officer, now runs our parent company. So really the whole organization's run with an eye toward Tucson, which makes a lot of us happy and comfortable. Here's just a little quick look at the service areas. You can see that TEP is down there. At the bottom, you can see the Unisource gas and electric territories. One thing to notice, though, as you're looking at this, is where our energy resources are located. We'll talk more about this going forward, but you can see those wind turbines are located in New Mexico. You can see those coal plants are located up in the Four Corners area. And it's, as you can see, we're getting the resources where they are available. And you can see all those little sunshine icons around the city of Tucson. We have a lot of solar generating in town, and we'll talk more about that as well. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but before we talk about where we're going, it kind of makes a little bit of sense to talk about where we started and the history, how we came to the place where we are. We've been around for a long time. One of the things I learned when we were celebrating our 125th anniversary a few years ago is that we actually charged more for electricity back in 1904 than we do today. Which is kind of crazy. We used to deliver power on fixed price contracts for customers who wanted it in their homes. And it was about 13 cents a kilowatt hour, which is a little less than, or actually a little more than what we charge today. Our company actually operated Tucson's first electric streetcar downtown, and ultimately sold that operation to the company that later became Suntran. So we've been pretty excited to get back into the streetcar business lately, if only as a sponsor. We also used to provide natural gas service here in town, but sold those operations to Southwest Gas back in 1979. Talk about getting energy where you can find it. Our first generating plant was run by mesquite wood. We burned that to create AC power. We also had actually the largest alternating current generator in the United States for like a month. Tucson really did have an early AC system. As we move forward, most of our power plants were operated by diesel, then natural gas. I mentioned those coal plants, and those really got built up to help serve the post-war growth that we saw here in Tucson. It was an affordable resource, and at the time it was considered the more environmentally sustainable and economically correct fuel source. In fact, one of the things that I'm sometimes tickled to tell people is that the largest power plant we have here in Tucson, which was built to burn oil and natural gas, we actually had to convert it to burn coal under orders of the Department of Energy. Based on a bill that was passed in 1979 that was intended to conserve natural gas as a strategic national resource during the Arab oil embargo of that era. So it's kind of crazy. We were supposed to convert all of those units to burn coal. We kind of dragged our feet. We only converted one of them. And by that time we got a waiver. Politics changed. We ended up not converting those other units. And in fact, we stopped burning coal in Tucson in 2015. Most of the generators we've built since then that are fossil fueled have been more efficient natural gas generators. And I've got a picture of some of those right here. This chart shows the conventional generating resources we have online right now. You can see the remaining coal units that we have, but what you're looking at in the image is our RICE generators. That's a reciprocating internal combustion engine fueled by natural gas. They operate very efficiently. They are essentially car engines, and they have pistons just like your car does if it's not an EV, and it probably should be an EV. Maybe we'll get to that later, but this technology really helps us support renewable energy in ways that I will describe a little more lately. But here in this group, I think it makes sense to talk about renewables. And TEP has been a pioneer in solar energy. We began building our first grid-tied solar array in the year 2000. The guy who designed it, Tom Hansen, was essentially the guy who built our Springerville coal plant. He was a remarkable power engineer. He used to show up to our TEP board of directors meetings in white tennis shoes and a Dilbert tie. He was the epitome of an engineer, and he designed a solar array that for a period of time was the largest and most productive on our side of the planet, which is saying something. We've continued to work in partnership with the U of A at the tech park. We've got a big demonstration site out there that is allowing us to evaluate solar energy resources. And we recently reached an agreement with the U of A that allows them to offset 100% of their scope 2 emissions by taking energy from two of our largest renewable energy resources. Here is a prettier picture that shows all of the energy resources, the solar and wind that we have online right now. One of the things I'll call your attention to under the solar column is if you compare, look, you can see the TEP resources. Look at those customer systems. Really, our customers, you have all of the solar we have in town is equal to, and by this time this year is surpassing the resources that we have online. I'm proud of that. I'm proud to live in a city where people are so invested in renewables, and we want to do everything we can to support that. Moving for the two of the systems, I am moving quickly, and if you've got questions, I want to make sure and get to them at the end. You could feel free and drop them in chat. I will get to them. Wanted to highlight a couple of new resources that we've brought online recently that are the largest on our system. The first is a giant wind farm in southeastern New Mexico, the Oso Grande Wind Project. 250 megawatts that it produces enough energy over the course of a year to serve the typical electric needs of, or the annual electric needs of about 100,000 homes. So it's a lot of energy. That's why it's built there. It is also located near existing transmission. So we did not need to build transmission to deliver this power to Tucson. We were able to use existing transmission for that. And we own and operate that system, which is not always the way we do it. Oh, skipped ahead. Let's see. Don't want to skip over this one. This system here, the Wilmot Energy Center, is the largest solar array on our system. It's also our largest local clean energy resource, 100 megawatts of solar plus 30 megawatts of battery storage. And that is also our largest storage array. This came online earlier this year. It was built for us, owned and operated by a third party, NextEra Energy Resources, and we purchased the output from them over 20 years. Our renewable energy development, sometimes we own it, sometimes we reach a power purchase agreement. We're really just looking for whatever is the best deal for our customers, and often the 30% federal production tax credit that developers can claim and we cannot sometimes makes these systems more affordably developed by third parties and owned and operated. But that may be changing with the new federal legislation that everybody has been reading about in the paper. So more to come on that. And here is a look at the distributed generation on our system. And this is, I had somebody pull this chart for me yesterday. And you can see that that number in the lower left-hand corner, those are the numbers of applications that we've received. And they are going up. That number you see there, 4,426 applications for rooftop solar. We received those last year. That's the most we ever received in our history. And you can see we've already eclipsed that this year. So solar remains very popular in our service area. And you can see down there on the lower right, the total just capacity in town, about 420 megawatts. Notice that that's DC. It's a small point, but when most people talk about the solar at their home, and when a solar installer sells you a solar array, they usually talk about capacity in terms of DC, which makes sense because that's how solar is generated. But we talk about it in terms of alternating current, and because that's the power we deliver to customers, and it's also the nature of power that wind turbines generate. And so a few years ago, we started talking, we converted all of our solar capacities to AC when we communicate with the public, just to avoid confusion. And so the scale, the number you see there, 400, is actually more like 300 and change if you were to convert it to AC. So now I wanted to talk a little bit, those are the resources we have. I've explained how we got there. Now let's talk a little bit about how we plan for the future. And some of the folks in this room have been involved in our resource planning process. Essentially, every 2 years, we evaluate, we take a look at the energy marketplace. We look at the technologies that are available. We look at energy costs. We analyze the load that we anticipate in our service area. And we set a plan for meeting that load over the next 15 years. And we've always had a role for the public in this process, but in our last IRP, our 2020 IRP, we stepped that up and created an advisory council, and we recruited representatives from the agencies you see at the right to make sure that we had a diverse group of stakeholders to give us advice about the kinds of energy resources we should be investing in. And this time around, we also focused much more closely on climate. Rather than setting a renewable energy target, which is the way clean energy policy is often discussed, we thought it more prudent to focus on carbon emissions, because ultimately that's what we're trying to address, our carbon emissions. And so we worked with the University of Arizona to develop a carbon emission reduction target that would be appropriate for our company in this community. What is it that we need to do to keep ourselves in line with the targets that have been the targets set in the Paris Accord? And so, working with the U of A, we set a target. And as you can see, this chart is showing, and it's kind of complicated, all those lines. I pulled this out of our resource plan, but all of those lines are indicating different portfolios that we evaluated, that we considered adopting. And that blue arrow at the bottom is pointing at the one we ultimately chose. And as you can see, it really is at the bottom of the spectrum in terms of accumulative carbon emissions. And it would keep our community in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. So what does that look like? It looks a little like this. You can see that we've got reducing coal. We've got natural gas about maintaining the same scale, but you can see that we're really ramping up renewable energy. We're leaning more on energy efficiency. And by 2035, we anticipate that if we follow this path, our carbon reductions, our carbon emissions will be 80% lower than they were in 2005. We also will be getting about 70% of our power from renewable resources. We will no longer have any coal on our system, and we will have 1.4 gigawatts of energy storage. And you can see the timeline that we had anticipated and projected that is on the bottom of the screen there. So that's the plan we set, and talk a little bit more about that. Here's a closer look at those carbon emission reductions. One thing I might point out is that the goal was defined in terms of reductions compared to 2005, because those are the levels that are often used in discussing climate change. However, our emissions in 2019 were just about at the same level. So it really is about an 80% reduction from real time, from current carbon emission levels as well. The other thing we are looking forward to achieving is reduced water use. There is a fair amount of water used to generate power in a conventional steam turbine, and that's where the steam comes from, obviously. And as we phase out those older generators, we're going to use a lot less water, 70% less groundwater for power generation, and no surface water at all. So that will be a big change for the better for our portfolio. We talked a little bit about ramping down coal. This is just another a closer look at that. We are this is a big deal for our company. The Springerville generating station is our largest energy resource. It's about 800 megawatts, which is about 2/3 of the power that we're using right now. And we're going to be phasing that out on a schedule that will allow us, hopefully, to reduce the workforce through attrition rather than layoffs, and develop a plan to support the communities in the White Mountains that have built up around both our power plant and the Coronado generating station that APS runs in the area. We are working hard to come up with a plan that really supports sustainable economies in those regions. You're going to be hearing more about that going forward as well. Here is a quick overview of everything I've talked about so far. This is just looking at the units that we're getting rid of, the resources that we're going to need to add. And, you know, they're just numbers on the screen, but 1,400 megawatts of storage, 2,000 megawatts of wind and solar. Those are pretty big numbers. And that's going to be a lot of work for us over the next 15 years. And this is what that ends up looking like from an energy mix perspective. This is about as simple as I can get it. You can see that last year we got about half of our energy from coal. 3 years from now, or 4 years from now, we'll get about a quarter of our energy from coal. 10 years after that, there won't be any on the system. We'll also be getting 70% of our power from wind and solar, and we're obviously going to need a lot of investment to get to that point. Let's see, didn't advance. Oh, every once in a while it skips 2 ahead. Okay, so here's a quick plug. We also, in addition to helping the community and solar installers connect customers with their own rooftop solar systems, we also have some programs that customers can choose to get a clean energy supply from TEP. You can go solar with us. The name is easy enough to remember, we hope. Go Solar Shares is a little more flexible. Go Solar Home is more of a commitment, but for 10 years you pay for solar energy at a fixed price. And that can end up being having some savings for you if energy costs rise. That program's been oversubscribed, but we just got approval to expand it. So we're looking to maybe sign up for some folks for that beginning in November and December. And you can find out more about that on our website at tep.com. Just search for Go Solar. And as you can see at the bottom, we're also looking to provide an incentive for home energy storage. We just got approval for that from the ACC. Don't have the program designed yet, but hope to soon. If you're ever wondering how much clean energy is on our system, you can find out at any time on tep.com. We have a real-time clean energy tracker that will show you exactly how much wind and solar we have, what percentage of our load is being served by those resources, and the estimated number of homes powered by that energy. I can tell you more about that calculation. That is some wacky nerd stuff, but we did our very best to estimate the number of homes that could be supported by the amount of clean energy being generated at that time. So again, that's on tep.com. So going forward, and I realize I'm at about 20 minutes now, so I'm gonna hit some of these really big issues in a really small amount of time. One thing that utilities are challenged with is integrating intermittent resources like wind and solar. They obviously don't operate like a conventional energy resource, which can be ramped up and down when we need it. This chart shows, it was pulled from our resource plan, and it shows a spring day without too much energy use. And you can see that solar production during the middle of the day really it fills we're getting a lot of solar production in the middle of the day, which sounds like a good thing, and it is a good thing. However, for a utility, we often need to support reliability with resources that run around the clock. And that dotted line you're seeing there, the thermal turndown, which, and this chart is for illustration only because we don't exactly know what the turndown was on that day. But that would be the theoretical lowest level of production that we could get from our coal-fired generating resources without turning them off. And if we turn them off, we can't turn them on again a couple hours later. It's more like we turn them on a couple of days later. And so it's a challenge for us to have the kind of response that allows us not only to dip down that low, but also ramp up that quickly. On the right side, you can see that just when our customers are starting to use more energy, solar energy is going away because the sun's disappearing over the western horizon. And so those RICE units I showed you earlier are really, they really help us with number two. They really allow us to ramp up output quickly enough to chase the sun over the horizon and support reliability on peak where we don't get very much solar at all. How do we address this as an industry? Well, I think a lot of you probably know it's battery storage. The challenge for us is the ramp rate that's going to be required on storage investment. So this I pulled actually this morning from the EIA website. And you know, the total energy storage capacity in the United States is expected to reach about a level is 1,650 megawatts by the end of the year. It's about, I think they said it was like 1,100 megawatts now, which might sound like a lot, but it's not even enough to keep our lights on for a minute on a cool day here in Tucson. We need a lot of batteries and we need them quick. You can see that the utilities in the country are planning to add a whole bunch of energy storage. But will it be available? Will it come online that quickly in a marketplace where electronics are increasingly hard to get your hands on? I don't know. That's going to be a challenge for us, is really ramping up storage at the pace that is needed. And you know, systems at the scale we need literally do not exist anywhere in the world. And so this technology really needs to be ramped up at a scale that we think people probably don't appreciate. We've never before had storage as part of our grid. We've only ever generated power and delivered that power. And now we need a third leg of that stool, storing it. And you can see that would be a much more stable stool, but there's going to be a lot of cost in that. And that's something we think people might not appreciate. People sometimes think about solar energy and its affordability in terms of levelized cost of power. And that is true that on a levelized basis, solar energy is super cheap. But the challenge is solar energy when you need it. That's what the grid needs. That's what people need. And that's what we're trying to deliver and what we need to deliver. So our industry needs to do these things. It's just going to be a little bit of a lift. And finally, I think this is my last slide. We're doing this at a time when resources are becoming increasingly scarce on peak during the summer in the West for reasons that are very directly related to climate change. We're seeing longer, more intense heat waves in the West. We are seeing persistent drought and wildfires that often interrupt the delivery of power through the West. And as a result of all this, it is getting harder to serve load reliably on the Western grid. The abundance of resources that our region enjoyed 15 years ago has now been fully consumed. And a number of plants in the West are closing. Nuclear plants, coal-fired power plants are getting taken down off the grid for environmental reasons, which is a good thing, except when you need energy on peak. And so it's becoming more challenging to serve peak load in the West. In response to that challenge, the California Independent System Operator has told other utilities in the Western US that it may interrupt power deliveries, reliable power deliveries that are scheduled on transmission lines through California. That energy may be seized when resources are tight and served to customers in California. And that creates a real problem for utilities in the Southwest that rely on power that passes through California. If I have an energy supply contract that is 100% guaranteed, that's one thing. If I have an energy supply contract that's probably going to be there, except when I really, really need it, that's something else. One way that we're going to try and address that challenge is if you can't beat them, maybe you should join them. And so we and other utilities are going to be joining. Some of them are already there, the CalISO energy imbalance market. And so this is a new platform for wholesale energy exchanges that operates in real time on 15-minute intervals. Traditionally, power supply contracts are hourly, and they're negotiated, days and weeks and months in advance. There is a real-time market, but it typically happens hourly. We need to be operating on 15-minute intervals. They're already doing this, the EIM. We think that this is going to be good for us in Tucson. We're going to get access to a lot of very, very affordable solar energy that's available in the middle of the day. Currently, APS is being paid to take solar energy from California during the middle of the day for grid stability reasons because of that thermal turn down limit that I showed you in the slide about 10 slides ago. And so we expect and hope to have access to some of that. We also anticipate that some of our resources might be available and valuable to help back up some of those renewables as we build out our own renewables. So really more robust, more responsive energy markets are another way that utilities are trying to improve the integration of renewables at the levels that will be necessary to get where everybody wants us to go. So I talked about as fast as I could, but that's my presentation. I would love to answer questions, and I can go into. I see that Claudia asked a question in chat. That's a good question. She's asking, how long do batteries last if they break or once their useful life is over? What happens to the battery? Can it be recycled? The short and real answer to that is that our industry doesn't know. We haven't been recycling these batteries at that scale. Right now, some utilities are using old car batteries and putting together, seeing what life might be left in those. But we haven't yet reached the retirement of battery storage. And so retirement of batteries, recycling of those materials, safe impoundment of materials that can't be retired, and this is true for photovoltaic generating materials as well. These are all challenges for our industry that we need to overcome because we need to start relying on these resources.
I see that we have a couple of hands raised. Kim, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit about vulnerabilities that our grid has, and actually what happens in California kind of affects us to some extent too. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on that? What do you think is the greatest vulnerability that we have, the TEP has as far as providing energy, in case of some sort of natural disasters or something, and how that might affect distribution?
Sure. Well, the greatest threat we face is related to this challenge we're looking to overcome, which is the resource shortage around the Western United States, the intensifying heat, the need for storage at levels that literally does not exist anywhere else. This is the greatest risk we face. But the grid is also our greatest source of strength. It's redundancy, it's access to affordable energy in New Mexico. We're able to get wind from New Mexico and natural gas fired backup power from Phoenix and renewables from California. We are interconnected in ways that help us all day, every day. But that is really our greatest reliability threat, is our ability as a region to address the climate risk in ways that support reliable service. Wildfires in particular, I'll just mention those. It's not just a California problem, it's also an Arizona issue. We have wildfires here that present a very real risk to our electric reliability. That's the most vulnerable we ever are, is when there's a wildfire burning in eastern Arizona along the New Mexico border. And if that wildfire interrupts our connection to Springerville, that's also the same transmission corridor we get power from Four Corners in San Juan. And that if it's a hot day in Tucson and we lose access to all of that power at a time that other area utilities also need power because it's hot in Phoenix too, that presents a reliability risk that we plan for all the time. Like these, we're always planning to overcome these challenges, but those are very real risks for us.
I see another question, hand up from Jock and Ira. Do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Hi, thanks, Joe, for the presentation. It's really informative. I've got a couple of questions. The first one, I noticed that on that turn down grid that you posted, that the wind was really steady throughout. Like it didn't have that kind of like peak and drop like the solar did. You might have already answered the question with the wildfires burning in Eastern Arizona. Is that our biggest threat to just using more wind in lieu of solar?
So, that as far as that day and the consistency of wind output on that day, we were just lucky that day. Honestly, that was a really good wind day. And normally we're seeing more wind in the morning and in the evening, sometimes into the overnight hours. And that's one of the reasons we really like that Oso Grande wind farm, because the wind resource in that part of New Mexico really does ramp up on as solar is disappearing. It's really a late afternoon, early evening peak. And so it's very valuable to us from a resiliency perspective. But yes, we are tethered to that resource by a 350-mile transmission line that is vulnerable to whatever might happen on those 350 miles. So there are other corridors, there's another project that we're talking about building. The South Line transmission project would add another corridor in that area for resiliency, but not everybody likes transmission lines, as we're learning. And so part of the challenge for us is finding ways to develop the system resources that give us the resiliency we need when our resources are located where these natural resources are.
Gotcha.
We have a question in the chat from Duane. Is the Wilmot storage facility flow batteries or lithium ion?
Oh, Duane. You would ask that, Duane. I love Duane. I think they're lithium ion, but I don't really know.
And looks like we have one more question. Oh, well, we got two more questions. We'll wrap it up with two more questions. Trace, you have a question. You want to unmute?
I am. Joe, have been working on a series of short stories about how Tucson became sustainable by the year 2038. And the background for that is future histories. They're events that I think are sufficiently likely that we need to plan for them. One of those sets of scenarios revolves around climate change, drought, El Nino patterns, and heat waves. And there's, in my mind, actually a fairly plausible scenario why we might have a bunch of things go wrong at approximately the same time, resulting in Tucson losing power. And I'm curious if you can tell us anything about TEP's Black Start plan.
So our Black Start plan relies on oil-fueled, on the ability of certain power plants on our system to start on oil, diesel oil. We have particularly the Sunt generating station in Tucson, Unit 4, is Black Start capable on diesel. And there are other resources on the system that are Black Start capable, and diesel is generally the fuel for that. I don't think Springerville is, but the Valencia turbine in Nogales is black start capable, as well as I think some of our other turbines.
Do you
So is
have-
that, does that answer? So we, and so we do have certainly black start capability. It's part of our resiliency plan, and it's hopefully we never have to use it.
Well, the question isn't, do you have plans for restarting things? It's while there's a serious disruption, do we have the power to support basic life support, meaning water, emergency cooling, food refrigeration, and communications? And I'm not sure the local distribution system is set up in a way that we could, with limited supply, make sure we have those functions going, because I know that I've been told that we can't pressurize the water system with just the gas-fired pumps that Tucson Water has. And I'm unsure whether we could keep the water pressure up if we lost the Springerville and hydropower on the Colorado River and had a reduction in power output from Palo Verde. And
You're asking interesting questions. I think for us, we worry about where we're most vulnerable is fuel. The natural gas resources we have are constrained by access to natural gas. And so we have invested in some storage, but that storage is located outside of Arizona. And so one of the things that solar generation and storage will give us are new opportunities for local resiliency that we don't have right now. Once we have hundreds of megawatts, 1,000, 1,400 megawatts of energy storage capability locally, I think that gives us some new options that utilities haven't had before. There's no history in our country of using, solar in this way, but I think we're going to have to make some at some point.
It looks like we have one more question in the chat. Have the wind farms been studied for their, this is from Tori, have the wind farms been studied for their effect on wildlife here?
The short answer is yes. The only thing I'll quibble with is here, because we don't have any, the wind turbines we have are located in New Mexico. We also, our sister company, Unisource Energy Services, has a small wind project near Kingman. And all of them, when you cite a wind resource, a wildlife mitigation plan related to birds is always part of that. So yes, it's definitely been studied. One thing, if you think about it, we build wind turbines where we can't build wind turbines anywhere. We have to build them where the wind is, typically in corridors. Well, we aren't the only ones who can figure out where the wind is. Birds have figured that out. So almost every wind turbine that a utility wants to build is using an area that birds are already taking advantage of because of that same wind resource. So it's a constant issue for developers of wind resources.
Our last question from Rocky.
I don't want to cut Jack off, but my question was that chart where it showed how you have a lot of energy for solar and then the peak energy starts coming up when the sun goes down. Would you ever consider asking people to change their energy, like habits, like you should run your washing machine or other like big energy during the day when we have solar? Or are you trying to not ask anyone to change their habits and just supply when people want it?
We're definitely asking people to change their habits. If you've driven around town lately, you saw a bunch of almost grammatically correct billboards advising people to lay low when the temperature gets hot. And you saw, if you were paying attention on social media, a lot of posts advising and encouraging people to conserve energy on peak. My boss, are reporting in a company like mine. You report to different kind of people. I happen to report to the vice president who oversees our energy resources, who buys and sells our energy on wholesale. So he cares a lot about conservation on peak. And I think you're going to see, you saw some of that already from us. We're investing money in it. We're doing as much of it as we can, but you're going to see even more. In fact, I think you're going to start seeing more. This is now just my opinion, but time of use pricing has always been optional for customers. It's confusing, so people don't typically choose it. But boy, you could save a lot of money. And our demand prices, we have a time of use demand plan. It's the cheapest power you can buy. As long as you can avoid using big energy sources on peak. I told my parents to go on time of use demand, and they live in their house. They live there all the time. They don't have jobs. They save money on that plan. I think you're going to see more active and maybe even more forceful efforts on our part to get customers on those plans. Because once you're on those plans, it's more than just us asking you. You want to save energy on peak because it's going to save you money.
All right.
Thank you.
I want to thank Joe for, it was a very informative, great overview, covered a lot of bases, and want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule this morning. You're welcome to stay with us, but we wouldn't be offended if you have to move on to something else, since it is a Saturday morning. So that's your choice.
Kevin, is it okay if I ask Joe a TEP specific question real quick before he goes?
Julie, you okay with that? I know you might be on the clock. She's okay. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay, thanks. So I'm happy to say I'm one of those people that put in an application for rooftop solar this year. And I talked to basically everybody who will listen about it. And the thing that I hear most often back, and I want to use their specific language because I'm trying to have a conversation with them. So I'm not trying to be rude when I say this, but the most frequent thing I hear back is, oh, well, TEP is just screwing us over with the rebate, like the sellback energy. So what kind of counterpoints do you have to that when I'm, having conversations with people about the benefits of rooftop solar?
Right. I would, the first thing I might refer back to was that chart that showed the number of rooftop solar installs and how it continues to climb. It used to be the case in our service area that a customer with rooftop solar was compensated for excess energy at a 1-to-1 rate with grid delivered energy. That was a policy called net metering. And the Corporation Commission replaced it with a different policy that is tied to the cost we pay for utility scale solar energy. And there were predictions at the time that policy was adopted that it would be the end of rooftop solar, that it would no longer make sense for anybody to put in solar panels, that really people should be getting equal credit for the excess power they provide. That hasn't happened. Solar still is a great deal for the customers who have it. Duane can tell you more about it. And if you hire anybody but TSS for your solar, I love that company. And they put in solar for happy customers year round. It still makes a lot of sense economically for people to use solar. I could talk forever, and I won't, about the equity issues associated with us paying. When I buy solar from a utility scale array, I pay, and I say me, it's obviously you. Everything we pay, you pay. So we pay like 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour for energy from grid tied. I'm paying 9 cents a kilowatt hour to customers for excess energy, and it's delivered on a schedule I don't know about. But so it's still a pretty good deal, is I guess what I would say. Yes, it's not as good a deal as it used to be, but your utility isn't hostile to rooftop solar. We're trying really hard to accommodate as much of it as we can. And now I'm really digging into the next person's time, but we're making a lot of investments in neighborhoods to accommodate more solar energy. There was a point in time last year when we discovered that 20 neighborhoods in town had so much solar on the grid that they were saturated under some new interconnection standards that were approved by the Corporation Commission. And so we were starting to tell customers that they could not install systems that export energy to the grid because that created some reliability concerns. Well, a lot of us got together and talked about that and decided that didn't make any sense. And so we started spending a lot of money and time to fix those circuits, upgrade them from 4 kV to 14 kV, install capacitive enhancements, replace transformers if it was necessary. Ultimately, we're doing everything we can to help customers add solar to the grid. I guess you should tell them it's still a good deal.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Julie, for letting me ask the question.
That was helpful. I learned something there too. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks
All
for
right.
the time, Julie.
Yeah, thanks again, Joe. Very, very informative. And we appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. I'd like to, let's move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Julie Robinson. Julie is the Sustainability Program Manager for the Pima County Office of Sustainability and Conservation. I think it's always great when your local governments, decide to create a sustainability office to look at ways to reduce the environmental footprint of their operations. So I think it's wonderful that we have a resource like that in the county. Julie oversees implementation of the Sustainability Action Plan for county operations, which covers carbon, water, landscape, materials, and workforce impacts. Prior to joining Pima County government, Julie worked extensively in the areas of conservation, marine ecology, and climate change. She was employed as a resident lecturer in Panama, where she taught undergraduate classes in environmental policy and socioeconomic values through the School of Field Studies, headquartered in Boston. Prior to that, Julie managed an interdisciplinary public-private National Science Foundation climate education project for 12 large organizations, including the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and Yale University. We've asked Julie if she could spend a little time with us this morning describing the work of Pima County to reduce the carbon emissions from its operations and services. So I'll turn things over to Julie. I think we need to make sure she has screen sharing capabilities.
Yes, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, which makes me really happy because this is, as many of you know, not a short sprint to do the work that we're engaged in, but it's a marathon sometimes. And so keeping engagement and interest, members of the public, and the fact that you're spending your Saturdays here to gain some training is just makes me feel great. So I'm very happy to be here. Let me just explain where I'm at right now, in case some people are moving back and forth behind me. I'm at Mission Garden. I don't know if any of you know where that is. It's at the base of A Mountain. It's a public garden. And I've just taken another position to be the executive director for Mission Garden. So I'm here today physically. I will be, thanks, Trace. But I will be continuing my work at the county part-time for about another 4 months while I bring my coordinator into the space of managing the program. So I just wanted to kind of put that up front so you had some context with the different things going on here. So let me dive in. Let me get my screen sharing going here. And I will pull up my presentation. Oops, here we go. And I also apologize because I managed to forget my headphones today. So I'm speaking straight into the laptop. Are you able to see that all right? Okay, good. All right. So let's see, here we go. So I know some of you, I'm just going to go through this quickly because I think it's important to put the context around Pima County, where we fit in this big conversation about moving our region towards a more climate resilient future. So the county, as you can see on the left, is a map here. It's a very, very large county. It's the size of New Jersey. We occupy traditional Native American lands of the Hohokam, Atam, Yaqui, and O'odham people. And it was established in 1864 following the Gadsden purchase of the lands from Mexico. And we share borders with other counties and with Mexico. While we say this is under Pima County's jurisdiction, in fact, much of the land, 85%, is federally managed state or tribal lands. We have a relatively high percentage of the population living in poverty, at least 14%. And we have a diverse makeup, racial makeup of the people that live in Pima County. And so this just gives you a sense of sort of where we are and what we are. And when we talk about the governance piece of Pima County, we're talking about all the region sort of in the dark orange on that map. It's unincorporated Pima County. The county seat is the city of Tucson, and the city of Tucson has its own governance management structure and elected officials and staff and resources. The tribal nations have their own systems of governments as well. The smaller towns surrounding Tucson in the county have their own systems of governance. So the county is responsible for managing the space that doesn't have other types of systems of governance. And we also have responsibilities through project charters and the establishment of the county to provide certain resources to our region. Okay, let's see. Why is that not going down? Oops, sorry. Bear with me here. Okay, so a little bit about the governance structure of the county. And I don't know how much you've really talked this far, so far in your training program about the governance structure. So just bear with me a minute. At the county, I think really what's really important to also understand is our space that we occupy as an organization is quite large in terms of we have 6,500 employees. That goes up and goes down depending on various factors, 41 departments, and over 600,000 square feet of building space. So we are, in a sense, the size of a very small town in terms of our footprint. And that's really the part that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the way things work at Pima County is through an elected board of supervisors. All of you, whether you live in the city, you still have a county board of supervisor. And there are 5 districts, each with their own supervisor. And the Board of Supervisors meets regularly, and there are public meetings associated with that where citizens can come to those meetings and express their opinions or perspectives about any of the items on the board's agenda. And all of that information is published on the County Board of Supervisors website. Under the elected body of the Board of Supervisors, we have a county supervisor, that county administrator, that's Mr. Chuck Huckleberry. Under him, a variety of deputy county administrators, under them directors, under them deputy directors, under them division managers, then coordinators, and tons of field and technical staff. But we also have these other arms and branches, including law enforcement, public defenders, the health department. So a very, very big ship, and a lot of moving pieces to this. Okay, so let me go back in time a little bit to kind of set the stage for where we're at today. I appreciate Kevin mentioning, yes, the county does have a commitment to sustainability. This has been really going on since 2001, when the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan was established. And this was a huge undertaking, involved private, public partnerships, academics, folks coming, the business sector, developers coming together. The overarching goal of that was, it was at a point of time when a lot of suburban sprawl development was springing up. And people in the community recognized we need to have a plan to deal with this. It needs to be a plan to deal with development and the protection of our natural resources, which are so unique and important. Long process, ultimately, the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan was established. It's a guiding policy document for a lot of the development decisions that happens in unincorporated Pima County. In 2007, our office was formed by the Office of Sustainability and Conservation, and that's also when the first iteration of the Sustainable Action Plan was developed. So fast forward a little bit, in 2015, Pima Prospers, the latest iteration of Pima Prospers, which is the county's comprehensive management plan that is required to be updated every 10 years by the state of Arizona. The most recent one was completed in 2015, and that is our outward facing sustainability component. So when I say outward facing, the departments that have sort of a public facing service side, this is where our comprehensive plan and our public outward commitments meet. I don't work in this space per se, in the Pima Prosper space, but I often serve as a liaison internally between departments and the community and these departments. Sometimes it can be very overwhelming to figure out when you're outside sort of the black box of county governance, bureaucracy, where and who do you connect with to begin to have a conversation or get questions answered. So this is where I do start to play a role. So I've been at the county since 2014, and I've been through 2 iterations of the Sustainable Action Plan for county operations. And the acronym we use for that is SAPCO. So if I throw that around that, I'm talking about this plan. This is on our website. You can download it and look at it. It looks something like, I'll show you the cover here. It looks like this. So this is our newest plan right here. And this is where I can start to tie into some of the pieces that TEP just provided and talk about our energy and climate change planning. In 2017, when the US pulled out of the Paris Agreement, the Board of Supervisors said, no, we're staying in. And so the board passed 2 resolutions there on the screen that outlined exactly how the county was going to maintain a commitment to the Paris Agreement. And those resolutions are on our website as well. You can Google Sustainability Division at Pima County and look for reports tab, and they're all there. So an outcome of those resolutions was that we established a really strong target to meet our climate mitigation goals. And for the first time, we began to really focus on climate adaptation goals. Again, this is all focused on internal operations. So this is county buildings, parks, facilities, and programs. And on the right, where I have those blue arrows, those are the departments typically that I will interface with. So I wish, in the best of worlds, I had the baton and I could direct everyone at the county how to do things and make it all happen. But in reality is I often serve as a navigator or a facilitator for the types of conversations that need to happen across departments or even within departments to start to activate, or my favorite term of all is operationalize some of our sustainability goals and targets. And I'll explain what those are in a minute. So this information is outlined in our action plan, and I'll tell you a little bit more what that's about. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think, again, just getting to the point, helping folks, because I used to sit on the outside of government, a long time working conservation and some time in academia. When you're outside a bureaucracy like a local government, it can just seem very mystifying. And when you're inside, things start to make sense within the context of how that bureaucracy works. So again, I don't have the baton to make other departments do what I wish they would do all the time, but I do have some power and authority to get directors to sit down around the table. And so to get to this plan, we had over 60 meetings with a variety of different directors and key staff. getting everyone on board with, yes, this is the way the county should be moving. And yes, me as a director of fleet services will agree to do X. So that was the behind the scenes process. Our plan requires the engagement and participation of all personnel at all levels to be successful. Okay, so here's where I'm sure everyone is starting to get, okay, well, what is it exactly you've said you're going to do and how are you doing it? One of the unique things about Pima County, one of the things I'm very proud about is that we've always approached our sustainability work from a very data-driven perspective. So we put a lot of effort into making sure we have mechanisms to collect data and vet the data that we're collecting, and that we use that to report out on how well we're doing. So because we've been doing that for over a decade, we could go back in time and try to estimate, and it was an estimate, what our carbon emissions were in 2005. And per the Paris Agreement, we knew we needed to cut our carbon emissions by 26% below what they were in 2005. And so we had the data to make those calculations. And basically the translation of that is that we needed to cut our emissions 50% of our then current levels in 2018 by 2025. So I'm going to talk about how we're trying to do that and how actually TEP is playing a role in our process as well. We also, which was really important to me, is not just focusing on mitigation, but also adaptation, because climate change is with us. Everything is getting more extreme as the result. We have very vulnerable populations, so we need to focus attention on that. So we are working to build an employee preparedness plan. We're putting energy and resources into green infrastructure, food systems, planting trees, and maintaining our long-standing commitment to protecting and managing natural open space and cultural resources. Let's see. So we have about 3 years left to go, to meet our goals and targets. And this is where things get a little sticky. We're not even close to being there. And how do we know that? Again, because we collect our data and we vet what we're collecting and we can report this out. So this is a graph from our annual report, our 2019-20 annual report. And it shows where we were. If you look on the left side of the graph at 18-19, you can see what our total emissions were in that year. And you can see, if you look on the far right side of the graph, you can see where our Paris Agreement target emissions should be, which is the 78,832 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. And then you see where aspirationally, even back 3 years ago, we decided we wanted to also know where we would be if we cut our emissions 50% below 2005 levels. And that's that blue 53,265 metric tons. Turns out the new US adoption of its naturally determined contribution target for the Paris Agreement has adopted the 50% target. So even 3 years ago, we were paying attention to what the science was reporting, that in all likelihood, that 26% below 2005 levels was not going to be sufficient. So, okay, so where are we at? Let's go to the right side of the graph again. And you're going to see a blue line, a dashed orange line, and a dashed gray line. What does that mean? Because we're looking at last year, FY 19-20. The dashed line was our estimated projection. Our blue line is our actual projection. And the gray line is where we would be if TEP had not brought on more renewables, because we use TEP's energy in powering the lights in all our operations. So we, the methodology that we use is widely adopted through ICLEI, is that you use the emission factor of your local utility to calculate your greenhouse gas emissions. By the way, let me just give a little plug. The person you don't see in this scene here is Sandra Mina, who's the coordinator and does all of this analysis. I am not the analyst. So there's somebody who I rely on very heavily, who is actually a climate scientist and an analyst, and she's doing these calculations for us. So what this is telling us is it's painting a not good picture, right? This is saying, wow, Pima County, if TEP hadn't brought on renewables, you would be going in the wrong direction, first of all. And even with TEP bringing on renewables, you, Pima County, are not doing enough yet. We're not even close to getting to the target we need to be at in 3 years. So this is the really important piece about data collection, setting targets, establishing baselines, and understanding where you are in this process, because you cannot, you know, the energy managers are so fond of saying you cannot manage what you don't measure. So measuring is really important. So there are staff resources at the county devoted to doing this work. We have an energy manager, another person behind the scenes, not with me right now, who takes data in from a gazillion, I mean, that's overblown, obviously, but many, many, many utility metered accounts across the county. We collect all this information through a software program. Oftentimes there's misreporting in the bill and data collection. He has to look at all this. He has to clean all the data. He has to look for anomalies, figure out that, yes, ultimately, what we're going to use in our reporting process is the best and the cleanest data that we have. So you might be wondering, okay, well, how is this parsed out? If you look at the pie chart in the upper right side, because we can measure and we can parse our energy consumption by sectors, by utility, we know that our buildings and facilities use about 40%, 47% of our energy consumption. And our combined wastewater treatment operations take about, what is that, about 43%. Fleet is relatively small, about 6%, and solid waste is about 1%. That gives us sort of a high level overview of like where targets are to apply intervention strategies to try to cut our carbon emissions.
Hey, Julie, can I interrupt you really quickly?
Yeah,
while
sure.
we're on the slide? What does, I'm looking at, you revised your goals, or at least down to 50% based on the new NRDC. What is NRDC?
Yeah, so NDC?
NDC, right.
Yeah, okay. So that's the acronym for Nationally Determined Contribution. So this is an important part, especially when you're in conversations with folks who are under the impression that somehow the United Nations is controlling the process for how individual countries meet their commitments. Every country that signed on to the Paris Agreement agreed to do its own internal audit to determine what its contributions were and what it should be cutting to meet the Paris Agreement. So these are national, this is the entire picture of carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions for the US. And the proxy is that we need to cut those 50%.
Julie, could you clarify really quickly, are these stats for Pima County as a whole, or the Pima County, like the government facility, government structures?
Right, just great question, great question. So this is just our operations. This is just us as an entity. But if you were interested in seeing, and maybe you already seen it or you've talked about this, the Pima Association of Governments every other year produces a biannual greenhouse gas inventory. And they take this data from all the jurisdictions and they do an overarching regional view. of our greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the entity where we as jurisdictions feed in our information, and then they calculate what the contributions are from the public sector, from public, private transportation, all those things. Yeah, so this is just the county. Yep. Okay. All right. Oops. Okay. So this is just another page in our annual plan that again sort of breaks out using a thermometer infographic of helping us understand where we are on these 4 targets related to our overall carbon emission, greenhouse gas emissions for the county. So on the top target, we're talking about buildings, facilities, and wastewater treatment. So really important to remember, wastewater treatment is a utility, right? So we operate a utility like TEP, only ours is the conveyance and treatment of all the region's wastewater. So this is a heavily intensive, energy intensive operation. And this is part of our role and responsibility as a county, providing this service to both incorporated and unincorporated areas of Pima County. So we're barely moving the needle on this item. Reducing our carbon emissions from our county fleet, we've done so much better. Our fleet director is really involved in bringing on electric vehicles. And you can see we're more than halfway to meeting our 2025 goal. So good work that way. Our fleet operations are keeping their eyes on the release of electric trucks that can also, a huge portion of our fleet are trucks and heavy duty vehicles. So keeping an eye on when we might be able to integrate electric trucks into our fleet. And then reducing our carbon emissions from our solid waste. And we're actually doing quite well there. So despite all the issues with recycling problems we have regionally, that's an area we're doing well. Okay, so we have 5 chapters in SAPCO. If you're interested, I invite you to go to the website and download the PDF of the document. But these are the 5 areas that we work in: carbon, water, landscape materials, and workforce. Nearly every chapter has a series of targets and a mechanism for reporting out every year how well we're doing, with the exception of some new areas that we are still trying to figure out. And that will be in the workforce preparedness and in some of the landscape chapter items as well, especially the food systems, because that's new. All right, I talked about adaptation. So previously just covered the mitigation part, right? How can we reduce our energy consumption? What are the mechanisms for doing that? And I think I'm going to save going into the exact details because you probably have questions. So we'll just hold that for a minute. I'll talk about adaptation, then we can go into questions. So under these areas, under the adaptation piece, we realized we have natural and urban areas that we can put attention into. A lot of that is through green infrastructure. If that's not a familiar term to you, it simply means using engineering methods to sort of replicate nature to create systems for passively harvesting rainwater and restoring native vegetation. And that has a cooling effect on our urban environment. So that's an adaptation piece. And then we're working to conserve our water resources, both in our facilities and we have a lot of parks and ball fields, working to help build a more resilient climate workforce. A huge number of our workforce, I don't know what the percentage is, are outdoor workers, right? And they're working in more and more extreme environments. So how do we rethink that process? So, we can't stop working outdoors, but there are ways we can do this that helps protect the safety of our workers. Food systems and then cultural resources are another piece of this. Let's see. Here's a little bit more information about green infrastructure. We have a target to plant 10,000 trees. We have about 3,500 planted, install 40 green infrastructure sites. and keep maintaining about 1,000 acres of landscaping with renewable water. And here's an example of how we did a triple bottom line cost benefit analysis of several green infrastructure sites. So triple bottom line means that you're thinking about not just the costs, right? Because everything I've just described has a price tag. And ultimately the taxpayers have to agree to, they have to agree to fund that, right? All these items have price tags. So we wanted to have a better understanding if we're thinking of the cost of these projects, what are some of the service benefits of these projects? And can we put numbers to those? So for instance, there's a firm called AutoCase, and it's an economic modeling software firm. They've been contracted on a number of county projects to help us do a triple bottom line cost benefit analysis. And they actually are able to assign values to things like pollinating benefit and air pollution reduction benefit and public health benefit and recreation benefit. So we start to see a more balanced picture besides just the costs, so that we're in a better place. We can, for lack of a better term, sell these projects to the public. There's a better understanding of who and the range of values associated with them. So this is a sketch on the left side done by a landscape architect for a future design site. I'm gonna pause, bear with me one sec. I'm gonna put myself on mute. I'll be right back.
And a program note, we'll take a break when Julie's done and then have Duane's presentation.
All right, so I'm actually sitting at somebody else's desk. We're sharing desks. Okay, so this is a sort of taking these ideas and needs to the next level. Oops, and go. All right, and one of the ways that we've also started to think about food systems at the county is really thinking about the fact that we're already doing food systems at the county, but we've never thought about it in that umbrella. So the county for a long time has been involved in acquiring ranches because they were under threat of being sold for development. And so as a conservation mitigation measure, it was like, let's acquire these ranches and let's manage the grazing leases. When grazing is properly managed on open space land, it can provide multiple benefits. And there's a few farms in this mix that we've also acquired. We do health and nutrition programs through the health department. And then we also do have several county parcels that are food sheds, food sites. So Mission Garden, Garden Kitchen, Native Seed Search. So we wanted to, again, repeat this process with the green that we did for green infrastructure, understanding triple bottom line of food systems on public lands. Only this time we did it at Las Milpitas, which is operated by the Community Food Bank on a regional flood control parcel. And this is on our website. The cut to the chase story is that when we incorporated all the benefits of the farm, there was a positive benefit over 40 years of over $1 million. So maybe that doesn't sound like a huge amount of money over 40 million over 40 years, but what it does demonstrate is, at least in this modeling, that it's not a negative, right? Because money is going in to operate this site and it's generating value. It's not consuming community resources. Okay, let's see what else. All right, so I think I'll stop there. I'll take your questions and yeah.
First I want to congratulate you on your new position.
Oh, thank you.
But we're sorry to see that you'll be phasing down your activities at the county. I hope they can find somebody of your character and commitment to to head up the sustainability program.
Well, Sandra Mena is pretty awesome. So I encourage you to reach out to her when she gets her feet under her and engage with her. And I will also keep that thread going.
This is Duane. Give her a greeting from her former colleague at TFS.
Oh, great, Duane. Sure, will do. Yeah.
I don't see any hands raised. Hey, Julie, can you stop the screen? Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
Uh-huh.
And I guess let me open up with a question. What are, in terms of future reductions in buildings and wastewater treatment and so on, where do you see some opportunities to sort of try to get on track to meet the goal?
Well, I'm going to answer your question, but let me go back one step, because I think, with Joe's presentation, and I was really, let me add one more piece to this. So Joe with TEP's presentation, I think those types of presentations are so helpful, because as the public, and we get to get a sort of under the hood view, right, of how complex this type of work is. I mean, we think, and this was my perception going into my job, we just add solar, let's get on with it. And it's like, oh, well, okay, there are regulations and there are policies and there's all kinds of considerations that go into that mix. And that IRP process, that TEP, I want to give them a pat on the back. Some of you know me. I know I've been a thorn in the side of TEP for a while, but that IRP process they did was really well managed. And at the county, we ended up taking the 14 portfolios they came up with. So that was the integrated resource plan. They presented 14 portfolios, and we scored and ranked those portfolios by our priorities, which were get there quicker, and in terms of cutting their carbon emissions, get to that as quickly as you can, balance the cost. What of the options on the table also reduce groundwater pumping. And so we generated our scoring and ranking and submitted it in support of, I can't ultimately remember which portfolio it was that went forward. So what I'm saying is that it's going to be, it's all of the above approach, in my opinion, right? We need our utility to go big, go fast with their renewable energy, because as we saw in our data analysis, by them bringing on more renewables, everyone in the community, their emissions are dropping because we're using more clean energy. And the most sort of cost efficient way to really do that is likely through these big solar and wind farm pieces. We do add solar at the county. And it's complicated for us because we're just like the community. We can't push load across property lines. The majority of our load is downtown. That means we have to put solar on the tops of things. That means blocking streets, doing heavy equipment, rerouting a lot of expensive electrical work. We're doing it. We have solar on one parking garage and we're moving it towards putting it on another. But we have to try to find a way to do it quickly and relatively affordably. We'll put solar, my energy manager, who is a friend and a colleague, is constantly getting calls that our solar shade structures in the parking lots are being hit by large equipment trucks. And they'll just take out an array, right? So that when that is a pattern that keeps getting repeated, you can imagine that there's less motivation to, keep using that model. I hope that answered your question. I got a little.
Yeah, that helps. I see we have a question from Kim.
Yeah. Actually, you answered quite a bit of my question just with what you were talking about, is like what you're trying to do to install solar panels on your county-owned buildings. Yeah. So how about, are they doing very much in the way of water harvesting, getting like cisterns and things like that for some of their buildings?
No, and I think there's a great deal of potential that could happen there. So we've been involved in very large scale water harvesting, like the Keno Environmental Restoration Project, which was a Corps of Engineer project. It's a large basin out by the Keno Sports Complex, and there's a trail around it. So some large passive type of water harvesting systems, but not the active water harvesting systems off of rooftops in downtown. So a lot of that's going right into the storm drains. But again, it's a question of cost and space, because those buildings were never designed to accommodate that type of storage need. So I'm constantly in this, conversation. Well, it'll cost this much money. Where are we going to get the money? Who's going to pay for it? Is the public going to be at large feel that's the wisest, best use of the public's money?
Thank you. Actually, I see we have a question in the chat, an interesting question. Do you have a contact or resource who I could follow up with on the food systems implementation strategies that are part of the SAPCO?
That would be me. So I'm still managing that for the next few months.
And that question came from Jessica.
Okay.
Stuart, you have your hand up.
Hi, Julie. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Hi, Stuart.
And given your wide-ranging knowledge of local policies and practices, everything from individuals to businesses to city government, county government, what do you think are strategic things that people like us, the ambassadors of sustainability, could lean in on, whether in terms of policy or education? Because we are here to do something.
Right. And yes. So the answer I give to that typically is not the one people want to hear. But I'm going to share it with you from my 7 years of experience being inside government. Be organized and mobilized and engage with your elected officials. Be consistent and constant. It's not a one and done conversation, right? And when you engage with your local officials, engage with them in a sense of community spirit and reciprocity, okay? Because remember, I kind of gave through that hierarchy at the beginning. So all of us at the county take our direction. The Board of Supervisors is our governing boss. The Board of Supervisors take direction from the public. And so by you giving your input consistently and constantly to your elected officials, that is a way to move the needle. But also be willing to help them when they need support. So it's a reciprocity, it's an exchange. And then the other way to do this is through neighborhood associations, right? If you're a member of your neighborhood association, working as a neighborhood association, lead to interface with your elected officials, city and county, that can really get the ball rolling quickly than just sort of the one-on-one individual types of conversations. So I wish, and frankly, my aspiration had been that there would be a task force for for those of you who've been around in a while, there's been a very up and down process with all the commissions and committees around climate change in our community, and some fatigue and burnout and frustration with how all these processes have gone. So I would say that my aspiration had been, and it may still happen, and this could be something you could advocate for, is sort of a citizens advisory committee to interface with Pima County on sustainability matters. So that might be another way you would like to choose to use your voice and skills. I will share what typically does not work well is engaging experts at the county one-on-one, so department directors or staff, and assuming or engaging with them in a way that sort of does not respect the body of knowledge and skills they're bringing to the equation. So we talked about this in the other conversation, Stuart, but there is, county staff are highly skilled, and they come with a really good background and expertise for the issues in their wheelhouse, right? And often when we're sitting on the public side, we expect these experts to understand all these other issues, and they're not trained in that. And that's not part of their day-to-day job. So, giving a little space in these conversations to find a meeting place, because between where we want to be aspirationally and the operations space to get there requires deep expertise. And that's where the county staff workforce come in.
That's a very good recommendation for us. I work for a state agency and co-chair the Green Government Initiative, and I think you hit the nail right. In terms of go to the governor. We always recommend go to the governor's office, go to your legislators, go to the Green Caucus, and because trying to affect change as you bottom up, I think you get some enthusiastic people in your departments who can be real advocates. That's a way to get it from the ground up. But those middle managers in particular, they're challenging to deal with, because you're right. This is foreign stuff to them. They're under a lot of pressure. They're worried about staffing, and now you're bringing something new to them. And I think you're right. Build that coalition and try to do some of it from top down.
And understand just one other piece of that. There is, in a bureaucracy, or at least my bureaucracy, there's not incentivization to go outside your wheelhouse, right? In fact, it's discouraged. And you're hired to do a specific job, and that is your primary responsibility. And some of those jobs have public safety health components, right? So if you're spending your time over here and not doing this, and then there's some catastrophe over here, wow, suddenly everyone's in trouble.
Good point. Nancy, you have a question. You might want to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I was wondering if there is a current city or county model that the county is currently using as guidance to help move the needle, if there are programs out there that are useful and inspiring to the county?
Well, I would say, let me two-part answer. I think the work that was started at the county that way predates my arrival. So maybe some of you knew Tedra Fox and Robin and Alex Oden and my director. So in a lot of ways, people are coming to us to look at our model, because we built something pretty innovative. Our predecessors, my predecessors really put those bits together. And one of the things we're finding is that it's all local, right? We can go out, and we did spend time about 3 years ago, especially as we're preparing the new Sustainable Action Plan, of doing a survey of what all over the country other jurisdictions were doing, and trying to find pieces that we could draw on for best practices. And we shared that, with our government. But it really comes down to a couple of really key things. There has to be support at the top for whatever you're doing, and there has to be a mechanism for funding. And so we can have the best plans in the world, and I think we have a pretty darn good plan. But if we don't have the support and we don't have the funding, we're sort of stuck, kind of dead in the water, being able to move anything forward. So I've been reluctant to chase plans and models when I see this underlying core issue. And it's like, okay, I can spend more time chasing plans and models, but I can't solve this underlying core issue. And that if I were to advise on next steps at the county, it would be, we got to look at these two pieces.
Which are the support and funding?
Support and funding. Yeah, because we've done a lot of.
If you had all the funding and support in the world, what
then I would have my magic wand.
With your magic wand, what would be your top?
Oh, well, my focus has always been the climate crisis, right? Because everything, if we can't get our hands around that. So I mean, I would have,
Emissions?
you know, I would have battery storage.
Emissions,
Yeah,
water, food.
I would change policies at the Arizona Corporation Commission to completely reconfigure. I mean, this is me hypothetically, right? Because this is being recorded, but you know, completely hypothetically reorganize the way our energy policies are written at the high level at the state, and to make access to clean renewable energy and storage features readily available, and work to leverage the power of many to bring the price costs down so that we could get more storage in site. Yeah.
I see that we have one more. I think we've got time for one more question. Trace. Trace, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, just briefly, Julie. When you were talking about relations with the staff, I was just wondering, my tactic has always been to try to get to the professional staff to try to find out what is and what they see as the options available to them, and then go to the elected officials. Do you think that's reasonable?
You know, Trace, I know, because I've been in some of those conversations with you, and I would say it depends, right? So here, let me answer it this way. My learning curve has been really steep in reconfiguring how I think about solutions. So the way, because I work with the same staff, right? I have to try to get those people at the table. So my learning curve and structure is that I work to help to set the aspirational goals and targets. Then I bring the experts into this space to say, how do we do this, right? You're the experts. How do we do this? I am not an engineer. I'm not going to tell you how to do this. So I think and this is constantly fluid, moving, ever evolving strategy. So I think where we sit right now, the better strategy, because we're facing things that are going to, the strategies have high price tags. And we need the elected officials to get on board, and we need to build some communication structure about why this is in the public's interest. We've changed a gazillion light bulbs, right? We're starting to put in EV charging stations, but the big stuff is going to be expensive. And we have to figure out how to get the elected officials on board with that and communicate to the public why it's important. And then leave the details to staff experts. They get the marching orders from the top, and then they have to do it. That's my recommendation.
Well, I certainly understand that you can't go to a department head and say, you should do this if this isn't part of their work plan. I'm not objecting to that. But as you say, they're the experts and know what is currently, and I don't. So before I started saying, this is what we ought to be doing, it would be nice to know what we
well, so
are.
take it to the higher level. So if you were to have a meeting with an elected official, say, look, we know, you know, that Pima County's, got my prop, hang on. This is on our website. Well, anyway, here it is. Pima County's annual report shows we're not making headway on meeting our carbon reduction targets. How are we going to do that? right? This is the policy document. They have the authority to communicate through the chain of command on the county staff side. We need to get moving on this because frankly, nobody wants a black eye. So just focus on the higher level and less on the specifics of the how-tos. Because as we saw through Joe's presentation and on the conversations I have on the county side, that the how-to piece is enormously complex. And I will just share, sometimes staff, as any of us would, get their feathers ruffled when somebody from outside our space comes in and tells us what to do. Same thing would be if somebody were to come in and tell somebody on the call how to run their business or how to teach their class or how to decorate their home. I mean, it's just, I think we need to step back from the how-tos, the prescriptions. This is the way I say it now. I'm not prescribing the solution now. I'm presenting the challenge, and because we collect data, we know where we are. Help us get to the strategy of the solution.
Okay, I won't argue, but I would like to know what is before I start arguing with anybody about anything. So,
well, let me gently say that I think even the terminology that you're using, Tris, needs to be revisited, not arguing, but engaging. And you do know what is because we publish a report every year. So, okay. I mean, we're very transparent. I just showed you, we're not making our targets, right? So that's the high level piece, and that the Board of Supervisors are directly responsible. They are the ones who are going to be left holding the bag. That will get their attention.
Well, I want to thank you, Julie, for spending some time with us this morning. I know you have some other responsibilities to take care of today, but I think we all appreciate the insights you gave us about how to affect change at the county level, what works, and being honest about where their challenges are, and I think that's very helpful information for the ambassadors going forward.
Yeah, we're all on the same team. We forget that sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
I agree with these sentiments completely, and with Kevin's comments. And there's many more questions I know that are lurking, if not directly on the chat box now.
Yeah.
I'd like to present our final speaker today. And this was an experiment today to try to see if we could do something, do an entire session, do a session with 3 speakers. We may have to rethink that, but I think by and large, it's working out okay. Duane Ediger is our final speaker. Duane is a solar panel installer and a practical-minded climate actionist. In 2018, he joined the Sustainable Tucson board after leading a successful regulatory effort to cut reliance on natural gas and add more renewables to TEP's long-term energy resources plan. Obviously, Duane knows Joe. Duane's prior background includes nonviolent organizing in situations of armed conflict in Latin America and the Caribbean. He enjoys riding his e-bike. I have an e-bike too. And leading singing at the Shalom Mennonite Fellowship. The title of Duane's presentation is Energy Agenda for Climate Action, Electrify, Renew, and Harmonize. He will outline steps the community could take to reduce carbon emissions through private initiative, public policy, and utility investment.
Interesting thank you for the introduction, by the way, and thank you all for your willingness to extend the normal Saturday morning time even longer. I will try to respect the deadline that we have. It's interesting that you referred to the campaign that I started my relationship with Sustainable Tucson in as successful, because ostensibly the effort was designed to get them not to install internal combustion generators, which burn natural gas, and those are now operating. So maybe the effort has borne some fruit around the edges of that effort that I always thought was unsuccessful. But I thank you. I think all nonviolent action at some level is successful, even when the objectives are not directly reached. So let's go ahead and share my screen because we got to move on this stuff. Let's see if I can find the right screen here. So energy agenda for climate action. Thanks for the introduction. And I'm just going to kind of go over real quickly what our intention is today. First, I'm going to talk about electrification. And so hopefully some of you had a chance to look at Saul Griffith's Rewiring America Field Manual, together with written by Laura Fraser and Sam Kalish also. There was some good stuff in there, and I just want to bring a lot of that out as well as to kind of place it locally for us here. So the first half is just looking at this broader issue of electrification, a little bit of renewal, and then kind of zeroing in on Arizona and Tucson, some real concrete things that will be opportunities for sustainable Tucson and for hopefully some of you as well. I pushed page down, it doesn't go down. Let's see here, there we go. So this is sort of a thumbnail sketch of some of the main points in that field manual. To get to our climate goals, one of the main objectives is to electrify nearly everything that will allow it to be powered by renewable sources. And the reason that it's a priority is that a lot of these big users of energy, cars, trucks, heating and cooling systems, buildings, these systems don't get replaced very often. And actually, they don't get replaced often enough that in their typical deadline, we are going to reach climate targets that we really could feel good about. So climate financing is something that's going to help smooth this along the way. Getting the big things first as a priority, the cars, the transport, heating and cooling, and getting more renewable energy installed. It's good. It was great to hear that TEP is doing a lot in that area. And I'm going to say that all of us need to not think of this in the way that maybe we traditionally have, where it's the utilities' job to get our energy sources in line. They can't do it all. They can't control that we're putting gas in our car or that we're burning gas to heat our houses or our apartments. And there are things that Sustainable Tucson can do to grease these wheels and get things moving a little bit better. To reach a climate goal of a little bit more than 1.5, the Paris goals, is a big challenge. And I'm going to just have a couple of slides about that later, so I'm going to leave it for now. Grid neutrality is another term that I had not seen before reading Rewiring America. And the basic idea is just like kind of like net neutrality. It's the idea of everybody is on a level playing field and nobody gets special preferences. And that is a value that we can pursue as we go through these many changes that we need to go through in the next 10 years. All right, this is a National Renewable Energy Laboratory symbol there on the right. And this is sort of the nuts and bolts of the big pieces of electrification. It's at the residential, commercial, transport areas. The big pieces of all those, heating, venting, and air conditioning, getting our water heaters replaced from even standard electric water heaters are not nearly as efficient as heat pump water heaters. If that's a new concept to you, they've been around some time, but not that long. Heat pump water heaters use about 1/3 the energy compared to even electric water heater, and much less energy compared to a gas water heater. And then other household appliances that use a lot of energy are also included in there. Commercial and industrial face a similar outlook, having to do with even larger, more expensive systems. One benefit that commercial sites can play in the transition is that a lot of people drive to work and their car is sitting during the daytime in a parking lot. If those big work sites where people drive to can charge those electric vehicles, that will go a long way to taking off some of that excess solar energy that's produced between 10 and 2 and putting it into cars where not only can it get us around town, but a lot of these cars that will be coming on also can help power our homes through the night so that we're not relying on the coal that TEP doesn't yet want to shut down. I'll just add this note on the bottom, 300% plus efficiency gains. I'll just use one simple example here. I have a Fiat 500e car, and it has a 23 kilowatt hour battery. That's enough to get me about 100 miles on a charge. And the equivalent energy of those 23 kilowatt hours is contained in 0.676 gallons of gas. So effectively, my car's gas tank is 2/3 of a gallon, and I go 100 miles. That's the energy equivalent in BTUs of the 23 kilowatt hours. Those are the kinds of efficiency gains we get when we stop burning fossil fuels in order to produce things. There's an automatic 2/3 that is lost to making heat and friction in internal combustion engines. And then this kind of extends through other situations as well. All right, just a couple slides on climate. These are reductions that are emission reductions required to reach a carbon budget for 3 different possible scenarios that I would rather not go outside the worst of these, for sure. 1.5 degree rise, we're almost there. 1.65 is a little bit more than 1.5, and I think that would honor the Paris goals. A 2 degree temperature rise, I would say, is not within the Paris goals. In order to get those, these require annual reductions. So those percentages under those temperature numbers are what is required to reduce each year from the year before in order to meet that goal on a worldwide basis. So if we wanted to try to make 1.5 degree maximum rise, it would require us to reduce our emissions by 13% each year over the prior year, starting now. And then those years under the emissions exhaust, current emissions are going to exhaust the budget. We're only 8 years away from 1.5 if we continue as we are now. That means we can never, even if we were to cut off completely in 2029 to 0, that would make us up to the 1.5 and so on for the other targets. Another perspective that I want to put in here, we heard both from the perspective of TEP and of the county talk about targets for how much % we want to reduce our emissions compared to the year 2005. And let's just understand that if that is the basis for our targets, then this is what it means. Okay, so our current emissions in the US are 15.6 tons of equivalent of carbon dioxide per person per year. The global average is less than 1/3 of that. And in a place like India, where we often say, well, their numbers are going up faster than ours, we're going down, they're going up, they need to do more. Their current emissions are less than 1/6 per capita compared to ours. So if we are going to hold ourselves to, let's say, go down to 20% or 50% of our emissions from 2005 by a given date, then for this to work on a global level, that means that also in India, we are asking them to go down by 50% or 80% from what their levels were in 2005, which I'm sure is much lower than this. So we get to go to maybe where India is now, and India has to go to 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/5 of what they are now. So I think it's fair if we say that is really not an equitable arrangement. So even these ambitious targets, from the perspective of a over-consuming country, an over-emitting country, are not really fair when you take in the whole picture. And this, just another little perspective, is this is worldwide emissions. The US emissions actually are on a slight downward trend, but worldwide, this is where we're at. And the little bump at the end there is from COVID. But the news reports that I'm seeing are that the COVID is not bringing us on a downward trend globally at all. We're still going up. All right, this is a graph, but it's a different focus now. Now we're getting into electrification. California's new vehicle registrations numbers have gone down. Fewer people are getting cars over the last 5 years overall, but on the right side, we see the percentage share of those cars that are EVs. And I'm not sure whether these numbers are including plug-in hybrid or strictly all battery electric. But obviously, even though the car market in general is going down, the EVs as a percent of that continue to go up. And this is an encouraging thing. And a little fact on the bottom of the screen there is that battery production at the worldwide level increased 2.43 times in the current year compared to just last year. And that's for the period January to July. So take heart. More EVs on the way, more batteries on the way. Battery storage is coming and it's working its way up fast. This is just a forecast, a little bit interesting to show the difference between what's going on in California, and that's in the bottom right, and in the United States as a whole in the left. We're about 6 years behind California. California currently has about 45% of all EV sales in the United States. And the source of this, which I don't know if I quoted it, indicates a sales chasm. It's across the chasm. So California is about to cross the chasm where EVs start to be very cost effective and basically become, have their own momentum in the market. In the US as a whole, we're not going to get there for another 6 years or so, but we're on the way. And here is just a story that I wanted to take a picture of, where e-scooter company in India says that market forces alone are not enough to get the electrification of transportation on the road. It needs to be, it needs to have some regulatory meat or teeth behind it. And I would not dispute that, and I don't think the author of Rewiring America would either. And this is from the UN World Meteorological Organization, which is one of the parties to the International Panel on Climate Change, that we have a 40% chance of experiencing a year with global temperatures averaging 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels within the next 5 years. So we are at the door of that threshold as we speak. All right, so now I'm going to shift away from climate. I did want to give us that perspective. This is a drawing, a chart that I took out of the Rewiring America Field Manual. See on the bottom there, it's page 68. And this is, it's a national level estimate of where energy production and use would be in a electrically rewired economy. So at the bottom was basically going through the calendar year of any given year. And on the left is just the amount of energy required in that month. And I have added lines of my own here to kind of give a sense of a difference, as I understand it, between Arizona and the United States as a whole. So you can see I put the / Arizona on the title there on the left side. We have more of an excess in April and May of solar production, particularly since Arizona would be relying more on solar because we don't really have the wind resource here. It's great to know that we can get some from across the border in New Mexico, but solar is our big resource, so that pushes our April and May production up a little bit higher because it's huge production in those cooler temperatures and less usage because we're not air conditioning yet. And at the same time, in July and August, it pushes our usage higher and our production lower because solar energy is a little bit less efficient on the roof under those hot temperatures, and you lose a little bit of production while you burn it more to get cooler in those 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock hours when it's very hard not to keep the air conditioning going. All right, so now I'm going to turn and we're going to go to So what do we do in this situation? And I want to start in Tucson, start locally, as I think is fitting with our prior speakers today and the aims of Sustainable Tucson. And moving on, hoping that our example, our initiative will then push issues at the level of our state, of our continent, not just the United States. I chose to put Turtle Island there because I think we can think of ourselves more connectedly with Mexico and Canada in some of the things that relate to an energy transformed picture. And finally, the whole globe. But so in the presentation, I'm going to work backwards. I'm going to start with the global and go toward the local. Let's see if I can get this. All right, here's just a little background music from Equatorial Africa. And here's flashing. And that's continuous globally. Remember our partners around. So the big thing at the Earth level is the climate conference coming up in November in Glasgow, Ireland. We have our one thing that Biden has emphasized, I think methane.
We're losing some of your voice, Duane.
Oh, the sound is messing it up. All right, I'll pause it. Thank you. Just wanted to feel connected around the world. There's so many wonderful cultures and things that we're also fighting for in this.
We were enjoying it.
So Biden's emphasis recently here has been cutting methane emissions, which are recognized more recently to be a very significant contributor to global warming. 30% of warming push is coming from methane emissions. So I'm glad that that's given attention. And some of the things that we can do, you know, often you think at the world level, you know, what do we, the little Tucsonans do? But we can understand the sixth assessment report, the science portion of which was just released a month or two ago. We can pay attention to what's going on in other countries and find hope where hope and examples in other people's efforts to mitigate climate change. And finally, we can set goals, as I referred to earlier, that are in fitting with our relationships around the world, and particularly as a high consumptive society, we can use that as a motivation to do more than some people's analysis might indicate is enough. All right, shifting now down, focusing on North America, Turtle Island. Climate, there's obviously the talks for infrastructure bill that have a lot of climate measures in them. Two of those that I just want to underline here is one of them would make the tax credit that is currently available for installing solar available back up to the 30% level from which it dropped a couple of years ago, and for a period of 10 years. And in order to make that an equitable benefit, it'd come in the form of a direct payment to the person who installed the renewable energy, as opposed to something that can be deducted from your tax liability only. So this means that people who wouldn't have enough tax liability to offset that expense would still get the benefit. And then another one is rural energy. We wanted to not just, I think one of the difficulties of our divisive country is a rural-urban divide, and recognizing that some of these rural situations need a hand is also important. Solar ready vets. If any of you are a veteran or know one, there are programs getting out there for getting these people into solar. And there's a career day on the 30th. I think that's next Friday. In case you know someone, you can refer to that. A climate finance day of action is coming up at the end of October. And all these things are linked, and those links, I hope that Stuart has passed you this file so that you can have the links rather than relying on, obviously you can't get a link off the screen. There's more there, and I'll let you peruse that at your time, because I realize that we're moving on a schedule here. But I do want to underline Electrified Rail Network. Some of you may not know that those diesel engines that drive trains through the tracks, on the tracks through our town, do not actually push the wheels of the train using the diesel motors. Those diesel motors are actually electricity generators that turn electric motors that run the train engines. So effectively, they are like a Chevy Volt, that has a little fossil fuel generator on it that produces electricity that runs the engine. And in Europe and many places, they have electrified the rail network to make it to be able to be powered by renewable energy. And there is a network in the United States that's also pushing for this as a part of the change that we want to build. So I just wanted to raise that as something that you probably had not heard of, and that we're in a multifaceted approach to a tremendous opportunity. Okay, zeroing in on our own state. I'm going to have a couple more slides on this to put a little more detail here, but the Corporation Commission is a fourth branch of government, and in a way we're privileged to be able to influence the choices that have to do with our energy in a way that is, I would say, in a way more accessible than most states for the average citizen. There's a very robust participation mechanism for giving input to decisions that are important in utility regulation. And two of those here are energy rules. In fact, well, I'll get to the details in a minute, and community choice energy, and then money for low-income solar installations. So the details on that are here. Today, you have a chance to speak on the energy rules. The energy rules are a state-level decision that the Corporation Commission has been working on for the last 3 years. During the last legislative session, the legislature attempted to take away the power of the Corporation Commission to make rules regarding renewable standards. They were unsuccessful in that, but they did kind of put the fear of the legislature in that body, and therefore the Corporation Commission needs your voice to say, please do pass the energy rules. They are not perfect, but if they are not passed, we will be in much worse shape than if they are. I spoke on the earlier session this past Tuesday, and you will have an opportunity today at 1 o'clock. And the link there will get you some talking points in case any of you would like to do that. A little bit of a longer term issue. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Now I can't go back. I don't know how to go back. Oh, there I do. Community choice energy is another Corporation Commission regulatory issue, and that there's been a effort for about a year and a half in Arizona to enable cities like the city of Tucson and others who are interested in increasing our renewable energy share in utility use to be able to make those decisions instead of the investor-owned utilities like TEP. You might think that based on that presentation that TEP is doing enough, but if you think otherwise, then this is an option that I would encourage you to look into. And finally, again, the federal LIHEAP program is designed to support low-income people with their energy bills and with weatherization and other things of their homes. There's also a DOE program that offers the ability of state-administered LIHEAP programs to fund solar installations or to subsidize solar installations on low-income houses. But the state administrator of that program has to request it. And up to this date, our state administrator has not requested this in spite of the tremendous solar resource that our state offers. So this is an opportunity for the Energy Transformation Working Group of Sustainable Tucson, should it form and gain strength, might decide to take on. Community choice energy, I brought that up. Here's just a little bit of a diagram to show how it works. Basically, the utility continues to maintain the poles and wires of the system. but the cities and counties that take on this role of choosing energy then get to do the contracting that makes arrangements with energy producers and ultimately can green up the energy sources for a utility area through its decisions. And this is a model that's working in multiple states currently and has successfully exceeded renewable energy goals while not significantly raising, in many cases, reducing the rates that utility payers pay per kilowatt hour. And it so happens that there is a meeting today at 4 o'clock of Energy Choice for Tucson. You can, if you're interested in looking into that, listening in, it's going to be an online meeting like this. You can just click on that link. All right, and narrow behind the state down to Tucson level. Community choice energy obviously is something that, in addition to being a state level decision to enable any city in Tucson, in Arizona, to do it, it's also one where cities who are interested can express that interest to the Corporation Commission, thus helping to gain a little momentum for the effort. There's a second solar co-op. This is out of an organization called Solar United Neighbors, and this enables people to get a break on the cost of their local solar installations, laying groundwork for an Electrify Everything initiative in Tucson. I'm going to get into the details, so I'm just going to go on down to the next page here. So this second Tucson Solar Co-op is going to be launched next month, toward the end of the month. And I don't have the details on that yet, but and I also have to say that I have a little bit of a double hat here. I am an employee of the company that last year, in the first solar co-op, was awarded the role of making the installations for this co-op. So I just want to put that on the table to avoid any hidden conflicts of interest. But it enables people to get group purchase savings. And apparently this year, they're also trying to have a limited number of installs for people who cannot afford it, and that they will actually be gifted installs. Sustainable Tucson is a co-sponsor of the upcoming solar co-op. And then I just ran across this the other day. The city of Portland, Maine has a Electrify Everything campaign, and it looked perfect. It's not a top-down, what do you call it, mandate. It is a voluntary program, but it uses the, how would you say, the moral capital of city government to inspire and inform people about things like converting their electric furnaces to a heat pump. If you have a single heat pump on our roof, does both the cooling and the heating. We got rid of our gas furnace when we got that heat pump, and now we have an extra closet space in addition to not burning any gas when we heat our home in the winter. And this other aspects of electrification can be promoted in that context. So this is a non-existent initiative, but one that an Energy Transformation Committee project could take on for Sustainable Tucson. And finally, there's a lot that can happen informally. I want to take a step back here and remind us that TEP is working in its operations. The county is working in its operations. Citizens don't have anybody working in our household operations except ourselves. So private conversations can go a long way in making people aware of what to do when their furnace goes out. Often when a furnace or an air conditioner goes out, it's an emergency, and people are going to get that unit replaced by the equivalent, a newer version. And we have to interrupt that automatic and emergency process with a climate emergency process that says, no, you need to reevaluate before that time comes, what you're going to do when it comes time to replace that. So having these conversations with people is an important way. And I would go beyond that to younger people, or people who are changing their work perspective, their work focus. Have them think about these things. We're in a historic moment here, and there's not just one kind of job that can support the energy transformation. There are many kinds, but it does take some forethought and a little bit of visioning to make that happen. I think we can be catalysts for that. All right, so finally, the Energy Transformation Working Group is currently a committee of one. I have not been actively recruiting people to join me, but I really respect the commitment that all of you have and the learning that has taken place so far in this training. And if there are any of you who think that you might want to join this working group of Sustainable Tucson, it will certainly enable us to advance some of these goals. So I have my contact information on the screen, including my email and phone number, and please feel free to reach out to me as soon as you want. That's all I had. I don't know if I've gone over time. I didn't pay attention to time, but I'm gonna let Stuart pick it up from here. Stuart.
That's great, Duane. I think we have time for a couple of questions. I know Stuart wants to make some announcements, but Anne, you had your hand raised. You want to unmute?
I moved my hand. I did not have my hand raised with my iPad. If I move my hand too much, it says it's raised. I have no question.
Kim.
Sorry.
Yeah, quick question about heat pumps. You know, I've heard good things, bad things. You obviously have one. You know, what are some of the draw? I know what the positives are. What are some of the drawbacks to heat pumps? Do they really efficiently cool well enough here in Tucson?
The air conditioner.
And what's a good firm to use if you want to put one in?
An air conditioner and a heat pump really are the same thing. The only difference is that the heat pump can be reversible so that it can heat as well as cool. So there is no difference in efficiency except by model number and specs. Now there are mini splits and other modern versions that can be more efficient but they're generally aimed for specific circumstances of not being part of a ducted system. But those can be definitely more efficient. Otherwise, the heat pump will definitely save you efficiency on the heating, definitely eliminate your emissions, and it should be the same on cooling of an equivalent air conditioner that has that level of efficiency.
So it works just as well?
Yeah.
For cooling?
Ours, I appreciate our rooftop version. A lot of people have an air conditioner condenser on the ground, compressor on the ground, and then pipes going. I like to have it all self-contained in that unit that's on our roof. That way, there's no energy loss from those pipes that go, eventually they lose their insulation. It's all contained within the unit, but that's different for different people's architectures.
I see a question from Danye in the chat box.
Yeah,
do you know about any financing options for heat pumps?
Oh, yeah. Well, so there is on your taxes, in your federal taxes, there is a energy efficient, what do you call it, rebate, or I'm not sure what the term is, that's available. TEP, if I'm not mistaken, also might have a rebate. Look on their website. They have those things fairly readily accessible. A lot of these things are there. And if you're low income, the LIHEAP program that I mentioned earlier also covers or assists in paying for many of these measures.
And Danye would like to know, are the mini splits as environmentally sound as the regular heat pumps?
Often even more so. They utilize a magnet technology that makes them more efficient. They also tend to have the ability to operate at a variable power level so that they're not either just on 100% and then off, but can operate at a low level and thus reduce both the momentary load requirement on the grid as well as overall energy use.
I think we're going to end things now. I apologize. Maybe we'll talk to Duane and see if he might come back for more Q&A, one of the future sessions, because I know there were 2 or 3 people that still had questions, and I apologize, but I want to thank you, Duane. And I think the thing that impressed me the most was it's great to know that we have some folks here like you that in Tucson are very dedicated, passionate, but also very well organized. It sounds like group has really thought through what the agenda is for furthering clean energy in the community and steps to get there. So I thank you for that. I'm going to turn things back over to Stuart.